Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a journey tonight, one into the unspoken, the misunderstood, and the deeply profound. You see, there's a secret side, a sacred side of women's sexuality that too often hides in the shadows, shrouded by fear, judgment, and misunderstanding. But tonight we shine a light. First, let's recognize the complexity of desire. Women's sexuality isn't some switch you flip. It's a symphony, a melody composed of emotions, trust, connection, and yes, passion. It's not something you reduce to a simple biological act, because for women, it's as much about the mind as it is about the body. Now, society has told stories, plenty of stories, and many of them, well, they're wrong. Society paints a picture of women's sexuality that is flat, one-dimensional, and incomplete. But hear me when I say this, those myths and stereotypes miss the truth. Women's sexuality is vibrant, dynamic, and autonomous. It's a force to be reckoned with. But here's the challenge: shame and silence have tried to steal that power. For generations, cultural norms told women to sit down, to hush, to ignore their own needs. Those whispers of judgment have kept so many from exploring, understanding, and celebrating their full selves. Yet, in the face of that silence, there's resilience. And with resilience comes revelation. When women embrace their desires, when they honor their bodies and spirits, they find a balance between emotional intimacy and physical expression. That balance is transformative, not just in relationships, but in life itself. And let me leave you with this: there's power in owning your truth. When women step into the light of their own self-awareness, when they wear confidence like a crown, the world changes around them. That power, it's not just personal, it's universal. So tonight, let us challenge the silence. Let us reject the myths. Let us celebrate the beauty and depth of women's sexuality, not as something to be hidden, but as something to honor. Women's sexuality is often misunderstood because it is so much more complex than society allows us to acknowledge. It isn't a one-dimensional experience tied solely to physical impulses. Instead, it's a layered, deeply personal aspect of life that intertwines emotions, thoughts, experiences, and relationships. For many women, desire is not just about the physical. It's about how they feel in their minds, how safe and supported they are in their surroundings, and how deeply they connect with themselves and others. It's about being seen, heard, and understood. What often gets overlooked is the emotional depth behind women's sexuality. Desire isn't something that operates in isolation. It's not a mere reaction to stimuli. It's an intricate web of feelings, memories, and relationships. For many women, the way they feel about themselves plays a massive role. Confidence, self-esteem, and body image can either fuel desire or suppress it entirely. How can someone fully embrace their sexuality if they're battling a world that bombards them with unrealistic standards of beauty and worthiness? On top of that, emotional safety is critical. Women's desire often blossoms in environments where trust is present. A meaningful connection, a feeling of being cherished, and a sense of security can turn the key that unlocks intimacy. When there's fear, judgment, or uncertainty, that desire often retreats into the shadows. It's not about fragility, it's about the human need for connection. Another layer of complexity lies in the way women process desire. Unlike the simplified portrayals in media, where desire is immediate and effortless, real life isn't always so straightforward. For many women, it takes time, it builds, evolves, and grows. It's often tied to mental stimulation, thoughtful gestures, or emotional foreplay. A kind word, an act of understanding, or even a meaningful conversation can spark something deeper than physical attraction ever could. Society has long conditioned us to believe that women's sexuality should function a certain way: predictable, linear, and passive. But the truth is that women's desire is anything but predictable. It's fluid, ever-changing, and influenced by everything from hormones to life stages to cultural pressures. A woman might experience desire differently depending on where she is in her life, whether she's discovering herself in her youth, navigating the responsibilities of adulthood, or embracing the wisdom of maturity. This complexity isn't a weakness, it's a strength. It's what makes women's sexuality so profound. It's not something that can be boxed in or labeled. It's alive, vibrant, and deeply connected to their identity. Yet, because of this complexity, many women feel misunderstood, even by their partners or themselves. Society's failure to recognize and embrace this intricacy often leaves women feeling as though something is wrong with them when, in reality, their experiences are perfectly natural. What makes desire even more fascinating is how it can change with personal growth. When a woman learns to embrace herself, when she lets go of shame and fear, her desires often become clearer, more powerful, and more authentic. She begins to understand what she truly wants, not what the world has told her she should want. This self-awareness is liberating. It allows her to step into her sexuality with confidence and to express herself unapologetically. Desire for women isn't just about what happens in a moment, it's about everything that leads up to it and everything that comes after. It's about how she feels in her skin, in her mind, and in her heart. It's about the connection she shares with herself and with those around her. It's about the freedom to explore, to question, and to grow. And above all, it's about the right to define her own experience, free from judgment or expectation. When we take the time to truly understand the complexity of women's desire, we don't just learn more about women, we learn more about humanity. We learn that intimacy is about so much more than physicality, it's about connection, vulnerability, and authenticity. Women's desire, in all its complexity, is not something to be simplified or dismissed. It's something to be celebrated, respected, and embraced for the powerful force that it is. For far too long, women's sexuality has been confined by myths and stereotypes that have shaped how society views and understands it. These myths have not only silenced conversations about women's desires, but have also created narratives that distort the truth, leaving women to navigate a landscape filled with expectations that don't align with their authentic experiences. These stereotypes are everywhere in movies, books, music, and even in the way we talk about relationships, and they have contributed to a profound misunderstanding of what it means to be a sexual being as a woman. One of the most pervasive myths is that women's sexuality is passive, reactive, or secondary to men's. This idea, rooted in patriarchal traditions, paints a picture of women waiting for desire to be awakened by someone else, as if they have no agency or autonomy over their own bodies and feelings. In reality, women's sexuality is vibrant, active, and uniquely theirs. It doesn't exist as a response to someone else, it exists because it is a fundamental part of who they are. Women experience desire in ways that are independent, multifaceted, and deeply personal. Yet this autonomy is often overshadowed by the outdated belief that their sexuality is only valid when it serves someone else's narrative. Another damaging stereotype is the idea that women's desires are simple, predictable, or tied to a specific mold. Society often assumes that women are either pure or promiscuous, as though their entire sexual identity can be reduced to one of two extremes. This binary not only erases the complexity of women's experiences, but also forces them into roles that don't reflect the truth. A woman can be confident, sensual, and in control of her sexuality without being reduced to labels or judged for it. The truth is that women's sexuality is not one size fits all, it's as diverse as women themselves. It evolves with time, context, and personal growth. Media and culture have also perpetuated the myth that women's sexuality is somehow less important or less intense than men's. From jokes in sitcoms to societal norms that prioritize male pleasure, this myth has created an imbalance in how intimacy and relationships are approached. Women's desires are often dismissed as complicated or too emotional, as if their feelings are burdens rather than vital aspects of their humanity. The reality, however, is that women's sexuality is deeply connected to their emotional, mental, and physical well-being, and dismissing it as secondary not only devalues women, but also limits the potential for genuine, fulfilling relationships. One of the most harmful consequences of these stereotypes is the silence they impose. Many women grow up internalizing the belief that their desires are shameful, or that speaking openly about their needs makes them too much. This silence reinforces the idea that women's sexuality is a taboo subject, something to be hidden rather than embraced. It creates a cycle where women feel isolated in their experiences, unable to express themselves fully or seek understanding. But this silence isn't just damaging to women, it's damaging to everyone. A society that refuses to have honest conversations about women's sexuality is a society that denies itself the richness of genuine connection and understanding. Breaking these myths requires courage and a willingness to challenge the status quo. It means acknowledging that women's sexuality is not a monolith but a dynamic, evolving part of their identity. It means creating spaces where women can speak openly about their experiences without fear of judgment or ridicule. It means rejecting the narratives that have been handed down for generations and replacing them with ones that reflect the truth of women's lives. When we dismantle these stereotypes, we begin to see the power and beauty in women's sexuality. We see it for what it truly is: a source of strength, creativity, and connection. Women's desires are not something to be simplified or controlled, they are something to be celebrated. By breaking the myths and rejecting the stereotypes, we allow women to step into their full selves, to embrace their authenticity, and to redefine what it means to live fully and unapologetically. The journey to breaking these myths isn't just about women reclaiming their sexuality, it's about creating a culture that values honesty, vulnerability, and equality. It's about recognizing that women's desires are just as valid, important, and multifaceted as men's. And it's about understanding that when women are free to embrace their full selves, society as a whole becomes richer, deeper, and more connected. Breaking these myths is not just a necessary step, it's an act of liberation, one that benefits us all. The interplay between emotional and physical intimacy is at the heart of women's sexuality, creating a unique balance that defines their experiences of desire, connection, and fulfillment. Unlike the often oversimplified portrayals in popular media, where sexuality is reduced to mere physical acts, women's experiences are deeply intertwined with their emotional worlds. This connection makes their sexuality profoundly meaningful, but also inherently complex. To understand this balance is to understand a vital part of who women are, both individually and in their relationships. For many women, emotional connection is not just a nice-to-have, it is the foundation upon which physical intimacy is built. Emotional safety, trust, and understanding create the environment where desire can flourish. When a woman feels deeply seen, valued, and respected, her ability to connect physically often grows stronger. It's not just about being touched, it's about feeling understood, about knowing that her vulnerability will be met with care and not judgment. This emotional layer is what transforms physical intimacy from a mere act into a meaningful expression of love, trust, and connection. This doesn't mean that physical intimacy is less important, far from it. Women's sexuality is deeply tied to the body, and the physical sensations of touch, closeness, and affection play a vital role in creating desire and connection. But for many women, the physical and emotional are inseparable. A physical touch can feel empty without an emotional bond, just as emotional closeness can feel incomplete without physical affection. The two work in harmony, each enhancing the other, and creating a deeper, richer experience of intimacy. This balance, however, isn't always easy to achieve. Life's challenges, stress, exhaustion, emotional wounds, or societal pressures can disrupt the connection between the emotional and the physical. A woman may feel emotionally close to her partner but struggle to feel physically engaged, or she may experience physical attraction but feel emotionally distant. These disconnects are often misunderstood, both by women themselves and by their partners, leading to frustration or even feelings of inadequacy. But these moments of imbalance aren't signs of failure, they are invitations to explore, communicate, and reconnect. Cultural narratives often fail to acknowledge this balance, instead promoting a one-sided view of sexuality that prioritizes the physical over the emotional. Women are frequently told that desire should look a certain way: immediate, constant, and unaffected by emotions. This narrative not only dismisses the importance of emotional connection, but also places unrealistic expectations on women, making them feel as though they are too complicated or not enough when their experiences don't align with societal norms. In truth, the balance between emotional and physical intimacy is a natural and necessary part of women's sexuality, one that should be embraced rather than dismissed. The emotional and physical aspects of intimacy are also deeply influenced by communication. When women feel free to express their needs, desires, and boundaries, they are better able to maintain this balance. Open, honest conversations with a partner can bridge the gap between the emotional and the physical, creating a space where both can thrive. Communication isn't just about expressing what's wrong. It's about celebrating what feels right, exploring what brings joy, and building a shared understanding of intimacy. In this way, communication becomes the bridge that connects the emotional to the physical, allowing women to fully embrace their desires. At the core of this balance is self-awareness. When a woman understands her own needs, both emotional and physical, she is better equipped to nurture that balance in her life. This self-awareness often comes with time, experience, and the courage to explore her own desires without fear of judgment. It's about knowing when she needs emotional closeness and when she craves physical connection, and understanding that these needs are not in conflict but in harmony. It's about embracing the ebb and flow of desire, recognizing that it is natural for the balance to shift over time, and trusting in her ability to find that balance again. The beauty of this balance lies in its transformative power. When a woman feels emotionally connected and physically fulfilled, she often experiences a sense of wholeness and vitality that extends beyond her intimate life. This balance enriches her relationships, deepens her sense of self, and empowers her to live more authentically. It's a reminder that intimacy is not just about what happens between two people, it's about how she relates to herself, her body, and her emotions. Ultimately, the balance between emotional and physical intimacy is not something to be achieved once and for all. It is an ongoing process of discovery and growth. It requires patience, understanding, and a willingness to embrace both the joys and challenges of intimacy. But when this balance is nurtured, it creates a space where women can fully express their desires, connect deeply with their partners, and embrace the fullness of their sexuality. It is a balance that celebrates the profound connection between the heart and the body, honoring the beautiful complexity of women's experiences. Shame and silence have long been tools used to suppress women's sexuality, creating a culture where open dialogue about desire and intimacy is discouraged or outright forbidden. These forces have a profound and far-reaching impact, shaping how women view themselves, their relationships, and their role in society. From an early age, many women are taught either explicitly or implicitly that their sexuality is something to be hidden, controlled, or minimized. This conditioning doesn't just limit their ability to express themselves, it also chips away at their sense of self-worth and autonomy. Shame is often the first barrier women encounter when it comes to understanding and embracing their sexuality. It begins with the messages they receive as children: what is appropriate to talk about, how they should behave, and what it means to be good. These lessons are reinforced by societal norms, religious teachings, and cultural expectations, all of which often frame women's sexuality as something that must be contained. Desires that deviate from these narrow expectations are labeled as wrong or immoral, creating a deep sense of guilt for women who dare to explore or embrace their own needs. This shame extends far beyond personal feelings; it becomes embedded in the very fabric of society. Women who speak openly about their sexuality are often judged, criticized, or labeled in derogatory ways. They are told they are too much, too bold, too assertive, too confident, or not enough, too passive, too shy, too disconnected. These conflicting messages make it nearly impossible for women to find a space where they can feel comfortable and authentic. The constant fear of judgment forces many to retreat into silence, keeping their thoughts, desires, and questions hidden even from those closest to them. Silence, in turn, perpetuates shame. When women are unable to speak openly about their experiences, they often feel isolated, as though they are the only ones grappling with their struggles. This isolation reinforces the idea that there is something inherently wrong with them, further silencing their voices. It's a vicious cycle. Shame leads to silence, and silence deepens the shame. Over time, this cycle can have a devastating impact on women's mental and emotional well-being, eroding their confidence and their ability to advocate for their needs in relationships and in life. The silence surrounding women's sexuality also creates a significant gap in education and understanding. Many women grow up with limited or inaccurate information about their own bodies, leaving them ill-equipped to navigate their desires or communicate their needs. They may not feel comfortable asking questions, seeking advice, or exploring their own preferences, which can lead to confusion and frustration in their intimate lives. This lack of knowledge isn't just a personal issue, it's a societal failure to provide women with the tools they need to thrive. The impact of shame and silence isn't limited to individual experiences, it shapes how society as a whole views and values women's sexuality. By suppressing open conversations, society reinforces the idea that women's desires are less important, less valid, or less complex than men's. This imbalance creates a culture where women's pleasure and agency are often overlooked or dismissed, both in relationships and in broader societal structures. It also limits the potential for genuine, equal partnerships, as it prevents both women and their partners from understanding and appreciating the full depth of women's experiences. Breaking free from the grip of shame and silence is not easy, but it is essential. It requires a cultural shift that begins with creating spaces where women can speak openly and without fear of judgment. These spaces might be found in conversations with trusted friends, in supportive communities, or even in therapy, where women can explore their thoughts and feelings in a safe environment. By sharing their stories and hearing those of others, women can begin to dismantle the shame that has been imposed upon them, replacing it with self-acceptance and empowerment. Education is another crucial step in breaking the cycle of shame and silence. Women need access to accurate, comprehensive information about their bodies, their desires, and their options. This knowledge not only helps them understand themselves better, but also gives them the confidence to communicate their needs and advocate for their boundaries. Education also plays a key role in challenging the societal norms that perpetuate shame, helping to create a culture that values openness and understanding over judgment and control. Perhaps most importantly, breaking the silence requires a shift in how we talk about women's sexuality. It's about moving away from narratives of shame and suppression and toward ones of celebration and respect. Women's desires are not something to be hidden or apologized for, they are a natural and beautiful part of who they are. When we create a culture that honors this truth, we empower women to step into their full selves, free from the weight of shame and the constraints of silence. The impact of shame and silence is profound, but so is the power of breaking free from it. When women are able to embrace their sexuality without fear, they unlock a sense of freedom and authenticity that touches every aspect of their lives. They become more confident in their relationships, more connected to their own desires, and more willing to take up space in a world that has tried to minimize them. By breaking the silence, we don't just liberate individual women, we create a society that values honesty, equality, and the richness of human connection. Self-awareness and confidence are two of the most transformative forces in a woman's life, especially when it comes to her sexuality. They are the keys that unlock the doors to understanding, embracing, and expressing her desires. Without self-awareness, a woman may feel disconnected from her own needs, her body, and her emotions. Without confidence, she may hesitate to explore those needs or communicate them to others. Together, however, self-awareness and confidence empower women to reclaim their narratives, celebrate their individuality, and live authentically in every aspect of their lives. Self-awareness begins with introspection, taking the time to understand one's thoughts, feelings, and desires without judgment. For women, this process is often challenging because society doesn't always encourage them to explore their sexuality in a positive light. They are taught to prioritize the needs and desires of others, often at the expense of their own. This conditioning can lead to a disconnect between what a woman wants and what she feels allowed to want. Self-awareness disrupts this pattern by encouraging women to tune into their inner voices, to ask themselves questions about what brings them joy, what excites them, and what fulfills them on a deeper level. Through self-awareness, a woman learns to recognize and challenge the societal messages that have shaped her understanding of herself. She begins to see where external expectations have influenced her choices and where her own desires may have been suppressed or ignored. This process is not always easy. It requires a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths and to unlearn deeply ingrained beliefs. But it is also deeply liberating, as it allows women to reclaim their identities and redefine their relationships with their own bodies and desires. Confidence is the natural companion to self-awareness. Once a woman understands herself and her desires, confidence gives her the courage to embrace them fully. Confidence is not about arrogance or perfection, it's about trusting oneself and valuing one's worth. It's about knowing that her desires are valid, her boundaries are important, and her voice deserves to be heard. When a woman is confident, she becomes unapologetic about who she is, refusing to shrink herself to fit into someone else's idea of what she should be. This confidence radiates into every area of her life, but it is particularly powerful in the realm of intimacy and relationships. A confident woman is more likely to communicate her needs clearly, to set boundaries that protect her well-being, and to advocate for her own pleasure and fulfillment. She is not afraid to say no when something doesn't feel right, nor is she hesitant to say yes when she feels safe and connected. Confidence allows her to approach intimacy from a place of empowerment rather than obligation, creating deeper, more authentic connections with herself and with others. Confidence also challenges the stereotypes and stigmas that have historically silenced women. A confident woman refuses to let shame dictate her choices or silence her voice. She recognizes that her sexuality is not something to be hidden or controlled, but something to be celebrated and expressed in ways that feel true to her. Her confidence becomes a form of resistance, a rejection of the narratives that have tried to diminish her power and her worth. The journey to self-awareness and confidence is not linear, nor is it the same for every woman. It requires patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to grow. Along the way, women may encounter setbacks, moments of doubt, and the lingering effects of societal pressures. But each step toward greater self-awareness and confidence is a victory, a reclaiming of their right to live fully and unapologetically. One of the most profound effects of self-awareness and confidence is the sense of freedom they bring. When a woman understands and accepts herself, she is no longer bound by the expectations of others. She is free to explore her desires, to embrace her individuality, and to define her own version of happiness. This freedom is not just about her intimate life, it is about how she moves through the world, how she carries herself, and how she relates to others. It is about living authentically, without fear or shame. Another powerful aspect of self-awareness and confidence is the ripple effect they create. When women embrace these qualities, they inspire others to do the same. They become role models for authenticity and empowerment, showing that it is possible to live boldly and unapologetically. They challenge societal norms simply by being themselves, paving the way for future generations to experience greater freedom and acceptance. Ultimately, self-awareness and confidence are not just about understanding and embracing sexuality, they are about reclaiming power. They are about recognizing that a woman's desires, feelings, and boundaries are just as important as anyone else's. They are about creating a world where women are free to live as their truest selves without fear of judgment or rejection. The power of self-awareness and confidence lies in their ability to transform not just individual lives but entire cultures. When women are self-aware and confident, they become catalysts for change, challenging outdated norms and creating spaces where authenticity and empowerment can thrive. This is the ultimate expression of freedom, not just for women as individuals but for society as a whole. It is a reminder that when women embrace their power, everyone benefits.